Okay, well, good morning. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Stewart Waddy, who's currently the Head of Strategic Intermediary Relationships at Bupa, someone who we've been doing quite a bit of work with over the past few years. And I've invited Stewart in because I think he can bring some really good insight into the role of a leader when we're looking to develop training programs for our people. So before we get into any of those particular questions, Stewart, it'd be great if you just maybe do a quick overview of your role and your background for us, please.
Yeah, sure, no problem. My background is predominantly a sales background, so I've been with Bupa in various different roles for approaching 10 years now. Um, During that time, I've looked after our SME direct sales operation out in the field. I've also looked at some of our existing business, large corporate teams, and currently I'm responsible for managing the strategic intermediary relationships that run across all of our various different business segments. So lots of challenges, but thoroughly enjoying it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stuart. So the reason I've asked you to join this call, because I see you very much as a successful people leader in an organization that has invested in providing development solutions for its people over a period of time. So, but my first question is, what do you think the role of the leader is prior to any participants even attending any development program?
Yeah, I think the role of the leader is really to make sure that you're working on a number of different levels for your teams and the business that you work for. So I think, first of all, personally, I believe I've got a responsibility to help and lead my team to deliver what they need to be successful within the business. But then on a deeper level, I think it's also really getting to know all of the people under your care, really understanding what drives them, what motivates them, and helping them to get where they want to be. I prefer to take more of an holistic approach to that as well. So, not necessarily just inside of work, but if that might take them outside of Bupa and elsewhere, or indeed looking at the things that they need to do to be able to perform well, which can involve conversations around what their life looks like outside of work if they're open to that sort of discussion as well.
Okay, that's great. So, that holistic piece is really important. What about sort of things like the timing around that, Stuart, for actually people attending training? Is the timeliness of any training or development program, do you think that's important?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it should be a continuous process, and I think part of my role as leader is also to make sure I'm challenging the people that I lead, so that they're looking to be the best versions of themselves and be the best that they can be. So that really is looking at some of the things that I think we're facing into as a business and making sure that they've got all the training and support to understand that. Lots of new things coming out as a consequence of emerging from the pandemic. But then I think there's also more granular stuff that can be very personal to the individual in terms of their individual needs and their individual development goals and aims for where they're trying to get to. So I think it should be constant, and it's a red thread that should basically weave through every conversation where it's appropriate.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I really like that point about tying it into individual needs. I don't know about yourself, but I've certainly been on training in my time. Great programs, really well delivered, but then actually it wasn't really necessarily relevant for me at that time for where I needed to go. So it wasn't as personal as perhaps you've just suggested there. So really good point. Thanks for that. So maybe just taking it forward then a step to
Mhm.
when your team are actually preparing and then attending any development program, what do you see as the key role of a leader to support your team during that time?
So I think one, it's been really clear around understanding exactly what's going to be delivered so that you can work with them on an individual basis to figure out exactly what they might look to get out of that training and that development. I think it's having a broader conversation with any performance plan or development plan that they have and seeing how it might support that. And then I think working with them to make sure that they can be present on the day. So kind of managing their mindset to make sure that they absolutely get the best out of it, because there's always an awful lot going on at the moment. And I think, one of the challenges is really being able to turn up and absorb that so that you get every bit of benefit that's on offer for you. And that will be
Yeah.
different from one person to another as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I know myself as quite an experienced trainer, I know I've had people that have come on programs, they come and speak to me and the day, oh, my leader might need me to come out and join a call. We've got an important client call. So, how do you prevent that kind of thing happening? Is it scheduling? Is it planning?
It's a little bit of scheduling and planning, but I think it's also working on the lead times to build up to it, so that people have got plenty of notice. They know that that's going to be in the calendar. Setting some very crystal clear expectations around the fact that this is an important investment in their time, so we do want them to be present. We want them to get the best out of it, because there are things that they'll take out of training that will stay with them for the rest of their careers. So while there are important things that may come up because of client needs, I think having some contingency plans in place to manage that, or minimize or completely cut out any risk of any interruption, is really important, actually.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, just one extra little question around that, actually, I just thought about in terms of, as a leader, and I've heard contrasting views around this with different teams and different leaders. Do you see value in you showing any visibility for part or all of the programs which your teams are attending?
Yes, I think so. It probably depends a little bit on exactly what it is that you're covering off. But I think the clearer people are on what they can expect to get from it and how it aligns with their personal goals and their personal development, then the more they're likely to invest of themselves when they're there on the day. So they can be really clear on how it's going to benefit them. But by the same token, sometimes part of that training might be to actually challenge people and put them off guard and put them into an uncomfortable position. So I guess it's dependent on the individual and the content that's been trained out, really.
Yeah.
Because it's really good as a leader sometimes to watch your people go through that learning process. Sometimes you can learn a lot about yourself as a leader, but also learn about how you will help them embed some of the things that have been trained in the future by watching their responses to it.
Yeah, and that's brilliant final point. Actually, 'cause it really links to the final question I was going to ask. But just before I do that, about the piece about embedding, I think that with all the pre-commitment that you talked about, I mean, from my perspective as a leader, if you really engage with your team before they attend, then if you are visible on the day, that's great. It shows your commitment, but you've established your commitment to the program by all the time you've invested them to before them coming. So I really like what you've talked about, and that's why I'm sure you've been really successful with your teams that have been on programs. So I mean, that final point you mentioned there about helping with the embedding. So I mean, what do you see as your key role post your teams attending any development program?
There's several elements to that from my point of view. I think one is to make sure that people are very clear, and I think most of the people that sort of work as part of one of my teams are clear on this, but it's understanding that they are very much accountable for their learning and their development journey. So it's ensuring that they're empowered, but also that they understand the importance of that accountability to be the best that they can be as well. But then I think it's looking at all of the various different touch points and opportunities that we'll have to help them embed some of that learning. So that might be looking at one-to-ones, it might be looking at observations, it might be looking at coaching sessions, it might be looking at them running meetings, but then thinking about the things that they have said they really want to get out of those training sessions and how that feeds into a development plan. Many will look at the development plan as being a bit of a box ticking exercise, but it's not. It's really a communication tool, so that we can have a really open dialogue on the things that they want to get and why they want to get them, and how that's going to help them move on in their career if that's their chosen path. And then you can work with them on some of those bite-sized elements to make sure that you're helping them get comfortable that they have acquired that skill, or that they've got evidence of actually delivering against that skill, or that new piece of learning that they've brought in. And I think individuals on your team, it's very good for them if they feel like you're supporting them on that journey. So while they are accountable and they own that, it's understanding how I can work with them to make sure that they get exactly what was on offer, and it helps them end up where they want to go.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And I say certainly from our perspective, the most successful organizations who, invest in training and development capability, and not just necessarily training, but other aspects as well. It's where the leader provides those opportunities. Yes, you've got to own it as the individual, exactly as you've just said, but actually giving them the opportunities to practice, to reinforce the key messages from any development program so that they can see the value, and then ultimately perhaps feeding through into the overall program metrics as well, because someone somewhere at some point is going to ask, did we get value for money out of this investment program? But that's maybe a question for another day. But thank you, Stuart. I really appreciate that, and hopefully we get a chance to maybe talk about a different topic at some point in the future. But thank you for taking the time, and hope to catch up with you soon.
No, that's great. Thanks, Alan. Speak soon.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart.